Dungeons and Dragons. We've got the dragons, and if you've played in any of my campaigns, you know at some point Fritz is going to throw a dragon at you. And dungeons. I love dungeons. If I had to pick one of my most favorite type of adventures, it would be dungeon-esque, dungeon-based adventures. Now, in exploring this, dungeons can become very, very complex. There are some modules where the dungeons are very intricate, a lot of up and down. Sometimes to access stuff on the third level, you have to go to the second, cross over, go to the third, and then cross back to the second to access certain points. There's traps. There's different type of architecture. I mean, literally massive, massive sprawls to discover. And so much of that discovery is important and a lot of fun. But sometimes that's not always practical, right? It's not always practical. Maybe because of time limitations where, look, we don't really have time to spend 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 sessions exploring this dungeon, but it's an important part of the campaign to go into a dungeon. Or perhaps you have a mixed group of players where some of them might enjoy dungeon crawlers, some might enjoy other aspects. Or maybe as a DM, you're like, look, I just don't want to commit to like a 10-session dungeon crawler, but I want to capture that dungeon feeling in there. So what I wanted to explore in this vlog is an encounter-based dungeon. An encounter-based dungeon. And how you can replicate that feeling of a dungeon. You can replicate that feeling of a dungeon without having kind of the classic architecture of, okay, you advance 30 feet and you're in a hallway. The hallway is 10 by 10, and then it goes off to your left for 50 feet, 10 by 10, to your right, 70 feet, 10 by 10, before turning north. And there's a door in the northeast wall, 30 feet down. You're like, wait, what? I missed that. What is it? And you're like mapping it out. How we can capture that sprawl and that excitement of the classic dungeon crawler without the bookkeeping mechanics. So I'm going to share an adventure that I run in this campaign that I regularly run. We haven't played it in a while. We're not going to run it in a while, so I don't feel like I'm giving away any spoilers. But this is an example of how I run a dungeon delve, a dungeon experience in one quick adventure. So the party was hired by a wizard. It's the Wizards Council, where you can't have open warfare on the Wizards Council because that'll just destroy the city and the whole economy and everything. But what you can have is rivalry and proxies. So you have these various wizards feuding with each other outside of the council, but inside the council, everything's all good. So these two wizards wanted to lay claim to a magical artifact located in a dungeon. They discovered the dungeon. They're there. The Wizards Council, of course, you can't have open wiz war warfare. So they laid down a contest. Each wizard, both wizards, would be allowed to hire a party or obtain the services of a party and send them into the dungeon. Anything that goes on in that dungeon is fair game once they're down there. Whichever party comes out with the artifact, that wizard gets to claim it. That wizard gets to keep it free and clear. So that was the narrative for the adventure. And the party went in. There's two wizards. One's kind of the good wizard. One's kind of the bad wizard. They had to decide who they were going to work for. Then I had two NPC parties, non-player character parties. One for the good wizard, one for the bad wizard. So this way, whichever side they chose, I've got another party to go. So they go into the dungeon. Party goes in one entrance. The bad party goes in the other entrance. Now, I have encounter points. I described 4 different rooms or 4 different little kind of encounter clusters that I was going to allow the party to encounter on the way to this artifact. So in describing this, it's like you enter into the dungeon, you see intricate hallways and archways, and you navigate through them, and suddenly you find that you're probably hundreds and hundreds of feet down beneath the city, perhaps heading towards one of the mountains in the distance. This dungeon is massive and sprawling. And you walk for what seems to be a good 30 or 40 minutes following different corridors and passageways. So I'm explaining all that when you finally come to this point in the dungeon where the hallway opens up And then I described the first point of the dungeon. This was a bigger room. There was some machinery in there. There was some interaction. There was a monster. There was an encounter. So they moved through that. When they finish that, then it's back to kind of generic describing dungeon delve. And there could be a couple of skill checks in there to find out more about the dungeon or get an idea of what's going on. And then it leads to the second encounter. So essentially, these descriptive passageways connected by an encounter point, it invokes, or should I say evoke, the feeling of a dungeon crawler, of that classic kind of map, but it allows me to essentially play them as encounters and play it in one session. So you get that feeling, and you get to those points underground, but it fills out nicely, plays very, very fast. And of course, if it was going to be over 2 sessions, I might scale it up. We could even scale it down and have it be 3 points. You go into the dungeon, the first room, you go into the dungeon, the second area, you go into the dungeon, the third area where you're fighting for this artifact, fighting the evil party. How the adventure ended. They beat the evil party. It was close. They got the artifact. They returned to the surface. Now, the rules of the contest are such that it's not over. The wizards can't interfere, but it's not over until the party hands it to one. So the evil wizard, of course, now starts offering deals and gold and magic objects. Was he going to deliver on them? No. Are the players going to challenge? Essentially, I think they were level 3 or 4, and you've got a level 15 wizard. Are they going to challenge that wizard with connections and stuff? No. They turned it over to the good wizard, but of course, that now made an enemy of the bad wizard. I mean, it was going to be either way, right? You kind of could see where that was going. But that is how that adventure ended. So I want to challenge you. Yes, absolutely. I love classic dungeon crawler type adventures with the huge map and keeping track and describing and figuring things out. It's one of my favorite adventures. But for adventure types, for various reasons, there are times when you may or may not be able to run such a classic dungeon crawl due to constraints. But this is D&D. We can take that tool set, we can take that toolkit, and find a way to deliver the narrative, find a way to deliver the same experience without all that heavy lifting.